Hello, everybody. Welcome to Authors on Audio. This morning's guest is Kara Reynolds. She is a watercolorist. She is the author of Priestess, Illuminator, Pilgrimess, Priestess. Pilgrimess comes out later this month. I hope you all enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Kara is an amazing person. So without further ado, please enjoy my interview with Kara Reynolds. Hello, Kara Reynolds.
Hello, is Talia the correct?
Yes, you have it exactly
So,
right,
I
Talia.
mean, it's a beautiful, by the way, it is a beautiful name.
Thank
I've
you.
never seen it before, but it could also be a very creative spelling of Talia. You know what I mean?
Yep,
So I
it
was
pretty
like,
much is.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do you prefer Talia or Talia? What is the
I
correct?
prefer I prefer Talia. It's
Yeah,
pronounced Talia, but like Talia is kind of the more traditional way that people usually say it, and
yeah.
usually it's spelled with an IA instead of the EAH.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's just its own twist on a name in general. So
Beautiful name. It
thank
really
you.
is.
Anyway, let's talk about you and your writing career. The first question I wanted to ask. Yeah, so I've seen you post that you had essentially given up on writing and you were more focused on your visual arts, your watercolors. Why, what made you choose that avenue? What made you change your mind and write Priestess? Like, how did you get back to writing?
That is a good question and a storied question, and I hope the answer is interesting. It's interesting to me. I always wanted to be a writer as a kid. Also, at the same time, I was also always drawing as a kid. I would ride my bike to our local library. I would check out an audiobook and I would listen to the audiobook and draw. And then I would write a story based around the drawings. And I did that, between the ages of like 7 and 15. And then around 15, I started to actually just write without the accompaniment of, because I was like, well, I'm better than I'm not going to write like just children's books. I'm going to write the next great American novel because I'm 15 and delusional. So I went to college for journalism and I had a really great internship at the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. And I was writing for them regularly. And I was, the idea of being hired after graduation was floated. And then print media tanked in 2008. I graduated in 2009. And so that was, not an option. I ended up, doing corporate type work and working for like a friend's dad. And then around the age of 25, I started to write again. And I wrote, basically, I joke that I wrote like True Detective before True Detective came out on TV. It was like I love thrillers. Oh my God, they're my favorite go to. I love them. They're very hard to write. I think maybe that's why I enjoy them because I'm just enjoying like media that it doesn't come naturally to me. But when I was 25, I really thought I could, so I queried it. And I didn't even get that many rejections. I got 78, and I've heard of people get 200 to 250, No agent wanted this. And so I was furious and appalled. And I was like, well, I just am not meant to be a writer. And then I wanted a tattoo like a year later, and I picked up, a pencil again to design it. And I was like, this is more soothing and pleasing for me. I think I'm going to be an artist. And then, 10 years went by. A friend of mine, should I throw in a trigger warning for a sensitive topic here?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so just trigger warning infertility if that is a trigger for anybody. My husband's friend's wife was going through infertility treatments, and I had been through that and decided to walk away. And she was, she just brought it up. I don't even know if she had decided treatment yet, but she ended up having a baby. But she was in that process of, oh, this isn't working, which is very disappointing. And I said, well, I painted great stuff when I was trying for a baby. What do you want to do? And she said, well, I've always wanted to write. She's an excellent writer. I hope she finishes her book. But she said, I've always wanted to write, and I've always wanted to write romance. And I said, well, anybody can write a book. And she, I'm crazy. I forget that I am crazy. And she was like, Kara, no, like nobody is telling you what to do. You can do it if you want to do it. And so I said, if you write a book, I'll write a book. And we'll be like accountability buddies. And so I wrote Priestess, and I have all these ideas. The gods of Jintar have always been, in here. Edie was the loudest of the heroines. I always say they're all sitting in a doctor's waiting room, like, when's my turn? And she's like, I was here first. So I just amplified the romance in that story, and I actually wrote it. And when I was done with it, I was like, whoa. Like, who is this person? And I was still resisted it. I self-published it. I still resisted being a writer. 6 months later, I put a story up on my Instagram, what if I wrote a companion and I pulled out, you've read Priestess, and
Oh
I
yeah.
pulled out, Helena, and I said, what
Yeah.
if I wrote and I had all these DMs, and I was like, well, same attitude, no one's stopping me. But in the back of my mind, I was like, this will never be who I am. I resisted it for the longest time. And then I did a Stuff Your Kindle event last Christmas. I accidentally made it free for 3 days instead of one because I'm a dork. And somebody posted it on the fantasy romance subreddit, and I owe that sub so much. It really had a little glow up that led to a publisher being interested. But the publisher, by the way, the interest from that publisher was a big publishing house in Russia. They wanted translation rights. They passed on me. But while they were, checking it out, I had reached out to an agent, and I was like, I don't know how you don't represent yourself in court. When your toilet is broken, you call a plumber. You want an expert. You don't want to DIY this. So I reached out to the woman who's now my agent, and I was like, what do I do? And she signed me, and we got some exciting audiobooks for this series. And I'm still self-publishing the paperback and ebook. That's a very long story, but that's how I got back into it. And I always say I Mr. Beaned my way into it. Like I just sort of kept tripping and falling into these situations. My friend Shelley Thorne, who's a really wonderful writer, she has described me as the cartoon character walking down the street and the piano falls just behind them from the upper story
I
window.
I love that, so that visual's amazing.
It's who I am. That's so accurate.
It's so fantastic to like to hear you just talk about your journey and how you ended up here, and just the visual of the piano, because from where I sit, when I picked up Priestess, it was just like instantly one of my favorite books of all time. Like, so in my mind, you're just like this amazing writer who has always been this amazing writer. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that's just how like I still see you that way, but it's so interesting to see that there's of course just this own inner world on your end and
Yes.
your experience that differs so much from my perspective as a reader.
I think it's funny how we don't see ourselves properly, and people will say something to you, and you'll be like, wait a minute, that's how you see me, and it's really wonderful. And it's not necessarily like where we should derive our value, but it is kind of wild to know that like somebody thinks like, oh, you've always been a writer, Karen. I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
Because I denied that part of myself for so. Well, it'd be like if somebody, your booksta is thriving, this podcast is going to be fabulous. But it was like if somebody just followed you. Do you have 7,000, 6,000 followers?
I'm close to 7,000, 6,500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like you and I connected when your following was newer.
Yep.
And it's like they wouldn't know that you're like kind of a little bit of a taste. What is that term when someone like a tastemaker, I think is the
Mm.
correct. I mean, yeah, like people look at your book recommendations and they're like, add to cart. But you just started a bookstore. What, you probably did it for fun.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, I did it for fun, and hopefully I also do some writing in my own time. Hopefully one day I'll kind of funnel it into that, but that's neither here nor there. I just, yeah, it's always crazy for me to see a comment where somebody's like, oh, if you recommend a book, it's like instantly on my TBR. And I'm just like, what? Like, I'm like, please don't take me that seriously. Like,
They
it's like too
are.
much responsibility. Like,
They
it's
are.
so weird. Yeah, it's so
Heavy,
crazy.
heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Yeah, I guess so. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Okay. Can you talk to me more about how you came up with the gods of Tintar? Because they're so beautiful. Like, I always say they're just these, like, gorgeous Mother Earth vibes. I read your afterword of Priestess, where you talked about how you wanted to recreate an image of God that was more of a loving mother figure, as opposed to kind of this, kind of maybe a more punitive God that some of
Yes.
us grew up with.
Yes.
Can you talk to me more about that process? Because it was just one of the first things I thought was just how beautiful and earthy and vivid your God, the entire universe, but these gods specifically. So tell me
Thank
more about
you.
that.
And in my next book, Pilgrimess, the lore and origin of the four gods of Tintar is explored in great detail. So that's something to look forward to. And I wanted to include that in Priestess, but it didn't bear any retelling because it's sort of like a director's cut of Gods of Tintar. And when we meet Edie, she doesn't know anything about Tintar. She's it's new, so we learn it as she learns it. So the origin story for me is like you said, it's a very good, punitive. It's such a good word. And this is nothing like, I'm not against. Sometimes when we talk about this, or when I talk about this, I always want to like throw out there, like, I'm not against like the teachings of Christ or the Bible in general. I'm against like this organized evangelical one way is the only way type teaching, which is what I grew up in, and it was so punitive. And then you look at like other cultures that have not been affected by this colonialist, like the Crusades, the way like Christianity like spread across. You look at those, and not every religion is perfect, but there's less of that. Especially like the older you get and the more pagan you get, if you were to research. So the Gods of Tintor are not like modeled off of anything. They're my and I go into this in my next book. They're my sort of interpretation of like trying to make the world make sense. And they're not all powerful. And it's kind of like how that phrase, there's no ethical billionaires. I don't think there could be a good God that was all powerful. So the four gods of Tintar they are accidental. They made children without meaning to. And then they decided, well, we've got to look after these children. And this is explored in my next book, the Fates came in. They're only briefly referenced in Priestess, but there are more powerful, more sinister forces at work. And the gods of Tintar are like sentinels that want to protect not only their children, but other children, because it's explained in Pilgrimess that the Fates also made children in the image of Tintarians, and as an opposing force, saying like our children will war with your children. And that it happens and it doesn't happen because the gods of Tintar literally say, well, we will love them just the same. We're here to take care of all beings on this earth. And so, and that's a long way of rambling in response to what you're saying, but like, it's true, like in the Judeo-Christian tradition, I don't think that a mothering God would sacrifice their one and only begotten child. It just wouldn't happen. I am not a mother, but I know mothers, and it never computed to me. And so when there are moments like that of self-sacrifice in any of my books, but particularly Priestess and Pilgrimess, that God does not, they want their child to live. They don't want their child to die. And if there is something like that happens in the storyline, it is entirely the character's choice and never the gods. And I think that's a really important distinction. Does that make sense? Or do I
Totally.
sound
Absolutely. And it's something, when I was reading Priestess, just something that I loved so much was the fact that, her god, Edie's, is she Mother Earth, right?
Mother Earth?
Yes. That Mother Earth, like, really emphasized Edie's choice in everything she did. So in every sacrifice she made, every difficult decision she made, it always came down to what Edie was willing to do, and not something that was forced on her, like the goddess was just there to
Facilitate.
give support. Yeah, like
Yeah.
be like a mother figure, like how what any good mother does, which is support their child and respect their decisions, and I loved it so much. I thought it was so beautiful. So thank you for writing it. Okay. So I also read Illuminator. I've read all your books. I also beta read for Pilgrimess. So I'm so excited to read the final version of it when it comes out.
That's right, you did.
I did, yeah. So just going off some of the lore, that you talked about, it's so cool. And without spoiling anything, some of it is just like, I don't even know the word, is like diabolical comes to mind, where it was just like, I was reading it and I was just like, oh my God, it's so good. I'm so excited for the book to come out and to read the final version.
Thank you. I did know. I'm so sorry. I did know that you did beta read it. I did know because I searched your name in my email the other day to verify our, we were doing Julia's podcast, and I was like, thank you, by the way. It's beta reading is unpaid labor. I always tell people that. That's why they're like, if I ever go to a beta reader say like, I just couldn't get to it, I'm like, it's work. It is actual work. You're giving feedback and reading for continuity and
Yeah.
consistency. It's unpaid labor. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I mean, I know for me, my beta readers have saved my books in like so many ways.
Yes,
It's so valuable. So I love to pay it forward, and it's not work if you love the book and you love the writer.
that's
So
true. That's true.
it really was my pleasure. Going back to Illuminator, I was just curious. You have such a strong ensemble cast. You had a lot of people to pick from. Obviously, Helena is kind of Edie's, right hand woman. But why did you settle on Helena for the spin-off book?
So an Illuminator, if anybody's new to this and is like, who is this lady drinking her coffee, talking to Talia? They Illuminator is my love letter to Priestess readers. I never thought anybody would read it, let alone a couple hundred, now a couple thousand people. I did what? So that was my like, thank you guys so much, because it really, like, it was incredibly personal to see people respond to something that I told myself I would never do, because I had this idea of what success is supposed to look like. Now I've reframed that, and now I have so much more joy in authorhood. But it was truly me posting, like, just sitting around with my husband watching TV and me putting on my Instagram stories. What if I wrote a companion novel with from Helena's POV? Totally, and that just came into my brain. And then I had all these DMs, and I was like, okay. So again, Mr. Bean, I just, clowned my way into it. And I was worried about writing her because she was not what I call, like, I have all these heroines in my head. I know what they sound like. I know who they are. They've been yelling at me for years. Helena was never there. And I was like, what if I actually sat down? So I sat down and I wrote a chapter. And the chapter that I wrote is the one where he checks on her after they first get to Tintar. And he offers her money because he knows that they are going to be like taken into the city, and they're going to be, they've been prisoners of war for like a month or whatever. And so he knows that they need things, and their things are being paid for them. But that, I say Thatcher, he's already like madly in love with her. But
Love
he knows
Thatcher
that
so much. I
it's like,
love Thatcher so
my
much.
notes for him are John Cusack with the boombox. Like, that's pretty much the breadth
Perfect.
of him.
Perfect. Yep.
But he wants to aid her, and he knows she's just been through two horrific traumas, really. And I was like, what would this be like? And so she's really at rock bottom in this chapter. And she came to me quite easily. And so that's when I was like, all right, I think I can do this. She and Edie are best friends, but they're very different women. And I was worried that I couldn't deliver her. So I really leaned into her being an artist. That helped. And the more I did that, the more I was like, I can do this. I can do this. Because in that chapter that I described, she notices the color of his eyes. And there's a passage where she talks about when an artist cannot name a color, they revert to nature. And then she describes his eyes as like rocks on the seaside that have lichen on them, or and like the sun and the sea on them, and they're like that's that shade of brown. And that was an easy way to connect with her. So again, it was like a Mr. Bean choice, but once I got to that passage, it felt more natural, and I leaned in, and like, it's a back and forth story, and most of the past chapters are about artistry or what it means to work as a living, as an artist. So yeah, I really enjoyed. It's a soft, quiet story.
Hmm.
Not there's a really sweet review that's 5 stars that says nothing happens, but everything happens.
Those are sometimes the best kinds of stories, though. Truly.
Yeah, I mean,
Where it's low stakes.
low
It's
stakes.
still. I mean, I wouldn't agree that nothing happens at all. I think that you get into Helena's backstory, which is so, my heart just like went out to her with all the ups and downs
Yeah,
that came with that, and you're on an internal journey. And I think that's maybe the difference between Illuminator and Priestess, is Helena's journey is so internal, where Edie's she is on a big old adventure in a new
yeah,
land, meeting new gods, like doing all of these big things. But I don't think one type of story is more valuable than the other. Not for me anyway. I
that's
really
true.
loved both of them for what they were.
I read everything, and I think you're absolutely right, because I've read historical fiction that is very, it it's like a pocket story that takes place in maybe a, a short period of time. There's lots of historical fiction like that that is just this little pocket. I think a lot of World War II fiction is like that. It's not the whole war. It's like, this little pocket because it affected the whole world. But then my number one go-to is thrillers with all these like moving mechanisms. And I think that's the beauty of writing is you can take this very simple or very complex story and give it its own. I've read thrillers that were quite boring, even though a lot
Sure.
was happening because I just didn't connect with the writer's voice. And then I've read, I'm trying to think of a book that isn't insulting to the book, but nothing happens. And yet there's this meat on the bone. I completely agree with you.
Let's talk about Pilgrimess a little bit because that's coming out April 28th,
April
which is
28th.
so exciting. Like I said, I am so excited to read the finalized version of it and just see where everything landed. Can you tell me about how, you talked about how working on Illuminator was different from working on Priestess. How was working on Pilgrimess different from working on its two predecessors?
That's an excellent question because it was so different. So I always feel like writing Illuminator was so I had this illustration contract come to me around, I think it was fall of 2024. And it was basically like a year long, and it was to do this coloring book for the state of Florida. And it was really fun. It's an adult coloring book. It's a little bit more. I actually got preview copies or advanced copies from the publisher, but I think my contract says I'm not allowed to show them to you.
Okay.
Show everybody.
When does the coloring book come out?
The week before Pilgrimess. It comes out
Oh
on the
my
21st.
gosh, you have a
Yeah.
big month coming up in April. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
ex I kind of chose Pilgrimess to come like, well, actually, I'm going to a Florence and the Machine concert the night of Pilgrimess. So I'm like,
To that concert in May.
oh, have
Yeah.
you seen her before?
I haven't seen her live before. She's one of my
Oh,
favorite artists, but yeah, I'm seeing her in Seattle in May.
this experience. You're gonna have so much fun.
I'm
This is my
so
third time
excited.
seeing her.
Oh my god.
It's a religious experience, and she
I
is a
can't wait.
consummate performer. You know those performers that are so into it that it's art. Like they're not performing, they're in it.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
that's her. Like every song is like a prayer for her. Like
Mm,
she's delivering some sort of like ritual that was personal for her and it's now public. It's just gorgeous.
I
Let's
can't
turn
wait.
this whole episode into a Florence Welch fan cast right now.
Honestly, go. Like, great. Anyway, back to your coloring
Enjoy.
book, back to Pilgrimess. But you were saying.
This contract was my first, what I would call like large professional contract as an artist. I've done all the things, art festivals and gallery shows and all that type of thing. And I've done a little bit of professional work, but this was like a big contract. It was with a publisher that does nonfiction. They're called Ulysses. They do like cookbooks and travel guides and that kind of thing. They do nonfiction. They actually have a really good romantasy coloring book that you've probably seen in like Target or something. And this was very challenging. And so I was wrapping up writing Illuminator as I was starting this. And this was a very, like, this is, those two things are my full time job now. And this was my first, like, full time thing. And it was really hard. So I was starting to write Pilgrimess, which was the deadline for Pilgrimess was to turn into Podium. The audiobook publisher was January 1st. And so I started writing it, and I am a fast writer, but I was writing it like around May of last year I started, and I was like, I have 60 illustrations to do. And they, you can turn them in and they're not done. They come back and they say, we want this changed. And so when I wrote Pilgrimess, I think it was about 200,000 words because I'm an overwriter and I had to cut a great deal. Otherwise, that's a 30-hour audiobook and that costs money.
Sure.
Like I said to my agent, I was like, how much do I have to cut this by? And she was like, well, you estimated 150,000 words, and that's like a couple more weeks in the studio. Cut 50,000.
My gosh.
So that was hard to do. That was
Yeah.
really hard to do. So I felt like writing this was this sort of concentrated effort because it was alongside this other big thing that I had also never done. Like when I wrote Illuminator and Priestess, there was no intention that there would be any kind of audience really. And the Illuminator's audience was going to be very specialized. But Pilgrimess, many people that are arc reading it, they've never read the other two books. So, because they're supposed to be standalone minus Illuminators, you can just pick up and enjoy. And so that was a weird thing to do, two things that I'd never done before alongside each other. And it was almost kind of a universal, like worse, like telling me like, okay, do you really want to do this, Kara? This is how hard you have to work. This is what you have to do. And so it was different. It's also a different narrative, as you know, opposed to Priestess. Priestess is very cerebral. You're here with Edie, and you're Edie from the age of 38 to 39, and you're experiencing everything. Edie is very tactile. Like she's very like, I don't know if haptic is the right word, but like sounds and touch are really big for her. I think I used the wrong word there, but whatever.
I get your drift anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thesaurus.com and dictionary.com are my favorite websites because I'm like, do
Yeah.
I actually know this word? Because
Totally.
sometimes I don't. But that was so different from Priestess, which was written for fun. Illuminator was written as like this love letter, and Pilgrimess was written, and it was, a joy to write it. Oh, writing is a joy. It's never a chore for me. But it was still this sort of concentrated, there's a deadline, there's parameters now to work in. And so it was like a real growth spurt of writing for me. I still really, really enjoyed it. But now I'm writing Prioress, which is the third standalone, like full-length standalone. And that's coming a lot more easily because I don't have this other giant project that I have to work on. And I'm also now used to writing something with the idea that other eyes are going to be on it. There's a deadline. So I just feel like I'm constantly like riding a tricycle with training wheels and then taking the training wheels off and seeing how far I can ride without the training wheels on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like right now. It's great, but it is daunting sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a big part of it was just the difference between, having when you're independently publishing things, you're on your own timeline, right? Whereas if you're going through an agent and a publisher, you got other timelines you got to meet. And God, I just imagine cutting 50,000 words that must have been such a challenge. Like, how do you, I would call it, I heard Brandon Sanderson one time call it killing your darlings. Like, you just have to cut these parts of the story that I'm sure you loved. Of course you loved it. You put it in there for a reason. How did you pick and choose? Was it like beta readers, or how did you get rid of that many words?
That's a good question. My buddy, her name is Melanie Van Donk. She wrote a phenomenal YA fantasy that's the first in a series called Shadow of the Four. I highly recommend it. It's a tour de force in fantasy writing. It's just meant for teenagers, which honestly, sometimes those are the best books. I begged her to alpha read for me. And I said, cause she's one of those people that's really, really brilliant, and really kind, but very honest. Like she would tell me. So she said, I think these are what you should cut. And she was right because they were like, again, I would almost call it like the director's cut. The things that I cut there was a great deal of Fox's childhood, which is the protagonist of Pilgrimess. That's her apprentice because she's like an herbalist and a midwife, and that it just wasn't conducive to the story. They were fun passages to write. They were beautiful. I loved like this unhappy child having a chance at happiness with my protagonist who never wanted kids but could not let this child be unhappy. I don't know if you remember in Pilgrimess, the apprenticehood that she has with her midwife mentor is bought by the midwife. She comes in and she offers Robbie's parents money.
Yes, I do remember. Yep.
And Robbie does that with Fox because she sees that Fox is unhappy. So it's like this beautiful pay it forward moment. And I had to cut that because it didn't relate. And it was and I'm like a sucker for like romantic moments. So this is terrible, but like Mel and I kind of talked about it, and it was kind of like cut that or cut lots of Avery, which is Robbie's first husband, and I love him.
I
So I had
loved him.
to
I
leave as
was
much as him as I could.
again, I don't want to say anything or spoil the story, but when I say I loved Avery so much, I just
He was
you're such
not.
a great writer. I guess I'll leave it at that. You're such a great writer.
I mean, it's implied in the first chapter that she's a widow, so it's
Okay.
not a spoiler to talk about his death. Although I love your
Gr-
delicacy.
Great. Then I'm so my just quick side tangent. My fiance is a psychopath when it comes to spoilers. He considers even sometimes what genre a story is a spoiler because he's such a sleuth for figuring out plot lines that he doesn't want to know anything. So I've learned to be extra sensitive to it. But
I
yes,
love that.
that's exactly what I was trying to say. I was furious with you when you killed him. I was so
It's
sad.
coming.
I
You
knew
knew.
it was coming, and I was still so sad because I spent this time getting to love him and getting to see how good they were together. And then you killed him.
He was never meant to be that great either. He was supposed to be like a pretty good guy, Like, well, towards the end, he develops like essentially an alcoholism
Yeah,
dependency.
yeah,
And that was a little bit more fleshed out, and that I had to reduce a little bit of that. So, like, her last year with him is not good. Not that that undoes anything, but
sure.
like, her last year with him was not that great, and there just was no room for it. But he is pretty wonderful leading up to whatever. And like, I did have a couple beta readers. He's very, very like lewd with her in the beginning,
Yeah,
and I did have a couple beta readers like point that out, and I said, and like, I totally get it. But like, one of the juxtapositions of him is like, he totally objectifies her. But when you are the only person in your town that lives the life the way that you live, and everybody sees you as this necessary evil, this scourge, they call you witch, it's a relief for Robbie to be seen as sexy
mm,
as opposed to this outcast that
yeah,
nobody likes, that should have been put to death when they were 19, that skated by all of these because like, she really, like, she escaped death because she is persecuted along with her midwife, who mentor, who they also call a witch. So Avery is like, I also don't like writing like perfect people.
I
I
hate
think that's
reading
so
about perfect
boring.
people, which I think is why I liked Avery because you're right, he was flawed, but
Fair.
he had, I mean, I don't like to read about perfect people because I'm not a perfect person.
Hmm.
We all have the good and the bad within us. And
Yeah.
and so I prefer reading about that in my books.
Yeah. Well, like, another example of like, there's a scene in Priestess where Edie is incredibly nasty, and she's mean, and she picks a fight with Ulrich, our male main character, and she's quite ugly in it. Up until that point, Edie is like, her number one superpower is likability. She's very like, hi, what's your favorite color? Like, that's her, and it to her detriment sometimes. It like, there were things about her life that she's never even told Helena, and she puts that mask on every day. So when that mask comes down and all of her insecurities come out, she's quite ugly with him. And I did have a beta reader say this was really hard to read, and I said, but I can't. It's awesome though, because this incredibly charming, friendly. She's so kind. Edie is so kind. For once, is just an unhinged, ugly underbelly human, and I think that actually, to me, that's winning. Like that. Do you know the author Rachel Harrison at all? I think you would love her.
No, I've never heard of her. I'll have to check her out.
Um,
Okay.
She is, there's this big conversation about women in horror right now, whether or not to call it pink horror, which is just so demeaning.
Yeah,
Um,
why? They're just horror books. Damn it. Ugh, okay, anyway.
it's infuriating.
That's so
But I
annoying.
think that Rachel is probably in my personal opinion, like one of the biggest names sort of at the front of this movement, because her books are on my shelf. I think her publisher is Berkeley, which is a romance imprint for Penguin. Why is my eyesight so bad? I think that's what it is. So they're kind of sold as like this sort of like millennial girls, whatever. But they're actually incredibly deep, dark, and allow, like, essentially she uses horror tropes as a vehicle for feminine rage or pettiness or just I'm tired of this. And I really like that. And in her latest book, which she each of her books tackles some sort of like horror tradition. So she's got a vampire book, a werewolf book, a witch book, like a skinwalker book. But in her late like a cult book, her latest one, Play Nice, that came out last year, is a haunted house. And the main character is like an Instagram influencer that is actually like quite shallow. But the more you unravel her, the more you realize how she ended up in this sort of, Valencia filtered existence. And it makes sense. And I didn't need her to be likable because she was so compelling. And I know that's really off topic, but like, I don't think I could ever write a perfect person. I think I would fall asleep at the keyboard.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just kind of a silly question. This has to do with Priestess. I guess maybe spoiler alert for Priestess. There's this back and forth of whether or not Ulrich is that young lady's father. I forget the girl's name, but
Opal.
Opal, that's right. And I think you left it purposefully ambiguous, but can you shed any light onto whether he is or not?
She's not.
She's
It's
not.
not.
Okay. The mystery is solved. I have to tell you, the first time I ever considered like reaching out to you, it was right after I read Priestess, and I wasn't sure, and I was just gonna slide into your DMs like,
Oh, you
but wait,
should have.
is she or is she not his daughter? But she's not. The mystery is solved. I can die in peace now. That's
He needs to believe it because he's a truly moral man, not
he is.
performatively, but he is a truly good man, which is such a juxtaposition to Evie's first husband, who was this like morally, came from this theocratic whatever, but he slept with a married woman and he hates himself for doing that, but in his mind something good came out of it because this child came out of it.
Interesting.
But he needs to believe that so he can forgive himself, and that's why like Edie's unkindness about it is so cruel, but that's not his daughter, but
That's
he doesn't she doesn't need to ruin that for him,
For
you know.
sure. Yeah, I love hearing you talk about the psychology behind that for him. It's his way of like finding some good in something very immoral that he did because he
That he
is
did.
someone that he just has that. I mean, I don't know how you describe it. It's just that heroism where like he needs to be on the the take the high road all the time,
he's
and the fact that he
he's
didn't, he has to have something to help.
something to justify probably what you would
Yeah.
consider his greatest transgression.
Yeah.
Um, the high road is an excellent description. That is the essence of him, is always taking the high road.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Ulrich much, but I loved him too because he's such a grump. He's so very serious, but when you kind of cut underneath that hard exterior, he is so quintessentially good, just such a good
So good,
person.
so kind.
Yeah, which it was so fun to see those layers get peeled back because initially you're like, it was a sort of, I wouldn't call him morally gray, but it almost took you on the same journey where on the surface you weren't clear what was going on underneath. And then
Yeah,
as you read the story, you kind of saw there was so much more going on there,
yeah.
which it was so
Well,
fun to read about.
she meets him on the worst day of his career. He's failed massively at what he's supposed to be doing, and then he makes another mistake, falling for. Although I think on in the back of his mind he maybe knew that she was not a priestess, but it was that, how you make a mistake when so many people are talking, and those opening scenes of Priestess, there's like 40 people in a room yelling, 30 people in a room, and he just makes them more like, well, we're not going to kill these women, we'll just take them as captives. And in the back of his mind, like before they even really leave the city, he knows they're not going to be political prisoners where we can use them for anything. They're not real. There are no religions in Eccleston. So his unkindness towards her is this like, oh my god, I can't believe, and it's like this
Mm.
huge mistake. Like when he gets back to his home country, when he gets back to Tintar, everybody knows he's screwed up. So he's proud and he's really embarrassed.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes perfect sense for his character arc, but I love them as a couple. I always joke that Priestess is the slowest burn I have ever read in my life. Because, like, and it's so delicious. Don't get me wrong. It's so fun to read.
No,
But, like, during the whole book, I'm like, you need to kiss right now. This moment.
I have
And it,
gotten so many furious DMs. Like, my God, it's quite flattering. Like, it's like,
yeah.
that's my favorite trope, though. I'm a slow burn girl.
Yeah.
Insta lust and insta love are actually people dog them. My buddy Kelsey Lee writes incredible insta lust, but it's actually quite hard to do,
Mhm.
like, and pull off. It's
Yeah.
really tough. It can be done. I can't do it. So I love the slow burn. It gives me time to, like, I'm a slow
Yes. I
cooker.
just want to give you these last couple minutes. Is there anything else about Priestess, your coloring book,
Ooh,
Prioress, or Pilgrimess, any of these books? Is there anything else you want to share in these last few minutes you want to make sure is out in the ether?
well, if you're, I don't, I'm assuming, do you think, no, do you think this will come out before Pilgrimess? It's okay if it doesn't.
Absolutely, it will. Yeah, no,
Okay,
I'm probably, honestly, I'll probably take this next week to edit it. I'm hoping by
okay.
next week, if not the week
There's
after
no,
at the
there's no
most.
pressure. Like, I don't want you to feel this, but I do have a bunch of, like, I'm calling it the Pilgrimess Tour. Most of it is going to be in Florida, where I'm from, but there's several signings and, like, things going on here. But also, I will be traveling to Georgetown, Texas. I haven't announced this yet, on May 16th to do a signing and a Q&A with Allie Hazelwood at Larkin Owl.
Exciting! Oh my god!
I've been crying for weeks of just joy. Because the blurb from her was like that was the highlight of my
I love
2025.
her.
I
I'm
was,
literally reading an Allie Hazelwood book right
oh,
now.
what are you
That's
reading?
Not in love.
My God.
Yeah,
You could have said any title and I would have went, oh my God.
she's the I am. Congratulations! I am so freaking excited for you. That's amazing.
And
What?
then I know and she's so nice. She's so kind. And then I will be in Nashville at Slow Burn, I believe May 30th. And that is, I haven't been there yet, but their store is so cool. They like sold, like their shelves were wiped clean on their grand opening. I don't even know if that was their grand opening or their soft launch. Like, literally, there was nothing on the shelves except for like two Illuminators and a Priestess, and every other book was sold out. And I saw it on their Instagram story, and I was like, because I mean, they, I'm still a little small potato, but like they completely sold out, and it was so cool. They had a line around the block.
So
So there's
cool.
going to be a pre-order campaign with them. There's a pre-order campaign up and running with Crafty Bookstore for Pilgrimess right now. They all have exclusive character art. There's going to be one with Kaleidoscopic Books that also has exclusive like Robbie art. So I'm really excited for that. And then I think that's kind of everything. I will be at Romancing the Era in Charlotte at the end of June, and Villains and Vixens in Orlando in July. But I think that's everything. Like, the summer is going to be really busy, but I think I'm going to dedicate the fall to. I would like to get Prioress out this year.
Yeah, I would love to
I
read it.
would,
So
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
would be that would be
I'm not.
fantastic.
I'm not doing a huge beta read. I'm gonna have some alpha readers, but if you would like to alpha read for me, let me know. But you're gonna be so busy with your fabulous podcasting.
Here's
That's why I told
hoping
you.
for sure.
I was like, you need to vet like your people because you're gonna be inundated. People are gonna
Oh
be
my
like, yes,
gosh.
I want to do your podcast.
I hope so. If
Oh
you're
yeah,
a writer, particularly if you're in that like romance fantasy,
yeah.
dark fantasy too, I read a lot of that. Like, just slide into my DMs. Like, I'm looking for people. So
You're gonna
come
be
on down.
inundated, girl.
That's
It's
great.
gonna be big.
Thank you
Okay.
so much for joining me and being my first
Of
guest on my
course. I
podcast.
feel so special.
You are so special. You first person I thought of. So everybody, April 28th, make sure you pick up your copy of Pilgrimess. It is so good, and the thought that potentially the version that's coming out is going to be even better than the version I read because it's undergone all of the final edits, and I just can't wait to give it another read. So thank you again for coming on here.
Thank you for having me.